Good morning, everyone. Here's your Mormon news update for October 30th, 2025. Let's start today by watching some clips from a video of Larry Y. Wilson talking about how the sausage is made. I previously focused on the parts of this video detailing President Nelson and temple building, but this next section is an equally illuminating look behind the institutional curtain.
I remember we brought a policy matter before the first presidency. There had been a policy which said that sisters who had dependent children at home could not serve as temple workers. And we raised the question with the first presidency of whether that ought to be reconsidered. They decided to look at the pros and cons of that. And we brought it forward in the meeting of the first presidency to discuss with them and presented a recommendation that we change that policy and no longer have a limitation on sisters. They could judge for themselves if their circumstances permitted. Even if they had dependent children, their circumstances permitted them to serve as temple workers. Sister Joy Jones, who was the general primary president, was in the meeting with us. And when we had the discussion, he turned to Sister Jones and said, "Joy, what do you think?" And she said, "Well, I was in this situation and I had dependent children who are still at home, but they were in school. And I was in a position where I could have served in the temple during the time of day when they were in school. And I was disappointed that I couldn't. And I would support changing the policy." And President Nelson took that feedback and they had a brief discussion with the first presidency and decided it was time to change that policy.
When I was active and believing, I would have thought this story was so inspiring. Not so much anymore. Thankfully, I'm slowly starting to see the problems with these narratives. The problem here is not that the policy was changed, but the process by which the policy was changed, and the institutional structure it reveals concerning women's authority and voice within church governance. First, Sister Joy Jones was only asked for her input after the recommendation to change the policy had already been formulated and presented by male leaders. She was invited to offer a single data point from her personal experience. She was not part of the body that formulated the recommendation, conducted the initial policy review, or had a vote on the final decision. President Nelson turning to her and asking for her opinion is an act of tokenism. It suggests the required female perspective was sought only to validate a decision already reached by the all-male leadership, rather than being integral to the review process from the start. Ideally, the policy regarding sisters without dependent children should originate from or be championed by the female leadership as they govern women's work and home life, which we all know is not happening in the church. The existence of a blanket policy that prevented mothers from judging their own capacity to serve speaks to a long-standing paternalistic view of women's roles, where their service was restricted by male leaders based on presumptions about their family duties. Larry's attempt at a faith-promoting story actually reveals that a policy which caused unnecessary disappointment and prevented service for many mothers persisted only because no man in the key decision-making body prioritized changing it until that moment. The story is framed as evidence of responsive revelation, but it functions more as an illustration of institutional patriarchy that requires a man to ask a single woman for input to discard a restrictive rule that was created and sustained by men. Now let's go to TikTok for a video from Joy Green 818 with the caption, "To the Latter-day Saint leaning into the trend of making videos saying, 'I drink coffee and I go to the temple and I don't wear my garments and it's no big deal.'" And then it has this message: the deviation spiral. It's when you do one small thing out of the norm. You get comfortable doing that and then do something else a little more out of the norm. And then when you get comfortable doing that, you add or eliminate something else to or from your life you wouldn't typically consider, all without realizing. As you repeat this process, you've conditioned yourself to be comfortable going outside the boundaries the Lord has set. Next thing you know, you're miles from center, from your standards to your habits to your spirituality to your marriage. Satan just needs to alter your route by 1 degree. After that, his job is easy, and that's the truth. You know it, and I know it. Nothing is temporal, everything is spiritual, and it's definitely not about the coffee. This reminds me of the poem I heard in conference so often.
Vice is a monster of so frightful mien, as to be hated, needs but to be seen, yet seen too oft, familiar with her face, we first endure, then pity, then embrace.
The TikTok and accompanying poem describe a concept known as the Deviation Spiral or the 1 degree of separation fallacy, which is a fear-based construct used in high-control religious settings. The construct is designed to ensure absolute fear-based compliance with all institutional rules. It asserts that any minor, out-of-the-norm change in behavior, habit, or standard, even seemingly innocuous or temporal choices like drinking coffee, are the first step in a conditioned process of spiritual deconstruction. The powerful imagery of being miles from center due to a 1 degree alteration to a route is a powerful metaphor for fatal incrementalism. It suggests that the spiritual path is an infinitely long straight line, and any deviation, no matter how small, will eventually lead to complete loss. And the final statement, nothing is temporal, everything is spiritual, is the theological linchpin. It eliminates the concept of harmless neutral choices, ensuring that every decision, from diet to dating, is seen as a high-stakes test of obedience. Now let's go to a Facebook group for LDS women where one woman wrote, "I've seen posts like these for years. I guess now it's my turn. Sisters, I'm tired. I see my sweet friend who has left the church but allows her children to decide if they'd like to participate in any or all church. They all participate fully. Early morning seminary, attend all church functions, etc. I see my sister and her husband not really prioritize the church, and yet all 4 of her kids have strong testimonies. 2 of them are waiting at 6:30 for their mom to take them to seminary. Meanwhile, my kids push and push as they do not want to attend seminary. We've been parents for 22 years. Of course, there are areas where we fell short, where we could have done more, I'm certain. We lead by example, both holding callings, bishopric, young women's, primary president, etc. We have tried with our older kids that you have to go to seminary or you don't get XYZ. And we've also tried with our younger kids to compromise and have them only attend 2 days a week. Do you want to know what all of our efforts have given us? Number 1, did all the things growing up, then left the church as soon as she turned 18 and is almost anti-Mormon in some things. Number 2, did all the things growing up, told us recently she doesn't believe in God. Number 3, has always pushed with the church and has never really felt a closeness to it. Turned 18 recently and is thrilled she no longer has to attend with us. Number 4, on the fence with testimony, told me today she can't wait until she graduates so she can leave the church. Pushes so much. I'm so tired. I don't know what else to do. My husband and I feel so defeated. General conference was a huge spiritual boost for my husband and I prayed all weekend that our children would feel the Spirit during conference." To me, it sounds like she is experiencing the collapse of the LDS teaching that righteous parenting guarantees righteous children. The mother notes that they did all the things, and yet their children are leaving, while children in less committed families are flourishing. This contrast exposes a fundamental psychological contract in the high-demand culture. If you live righteously and perform the duties, God will bless your efforts and ensure your children stay. When the promised outcome fails to materialize, parents often internalize a profound sense of personal failure. The exhaustion and defeat stem from realizing the formula is a myth. The spiritual injury here is the realization that years of high-demand performance did not yield the guaranteed spiritual result. Her post is a heartbreaking testament to the deep emotional toll exacted when a system built on obedience and external control cannot account for the complexity of individual agency and genuine spiritual belief. Next, the new garment styles finally dropped yesterday in the US. I made a short video about it if you want to go watch it. The church did not make enough for the demand. People waited for hours at storefronts, only to find that they were quickly sold out and the church online store crashed from the demand. While I am glad that those who still wear garments will have more options, I don't think it should be overlooked that no matter the length or fabric type, they are all about control. Offering more options creates an illusion of personal choice and autonomy without ever lifting the underlying mandate. The choice is still restricted to what the church allows to be worn, and the frenzy over limited stock simply reinforces the collective eagerness to comply with the institutional parameters, regardless of the inconvenience. Which reminds me of this video.
The new tank top garments are rolling out this fall. Our bride got her hands on one a little bit early, so we tried it with her dress. She didn't end up loving it, and we added a cap sleeve for her. But if you are looking into an option like this, just know that we can do a series of these little snaps in order to keep the garment in place. We did one at the front neckline, back neckline, and also at the crest of the shoulder to make sure that once you put the dress on with the garment underneath it, you can loop this underneath the garment and snap it into place so it doesn't shift from side to side.
The garment itself is a physical boundary set by the men at the top of the church. The need for a bridal shop to devise a workaround is evidence that the sacred boundary is inherently incompatible with the cultural reality of a modern wedding. The bride is forced to dedicate time, money, and emotional energy to modifying her dream dress, the universal symbol of her wedding, just to ensure the unseen undergarment does not show. What a high cost of compliance, where personal desire must be physically subordinated to institutional requirement. Instead of the bride being fully present in her joy, part of her mental energy must be delegated to managing the risk of a garment slip, which carries the psychological weight of a covenant breach. This practice, alongside the chaos of the new garment release, shows that even when the church tries to offer comfort or flexibility, the mandate for control remains the primary driver. Now let's go to news from the Almond Grove Ward in California. A Facebook post in their group says, the Oakland Temple has very few patrons scheduled for this coming Friday evening. Halloween. Side note, if you want an uplifting activity for your family rather than going door to door for candy, bring them to the door of the temple and spend time serving your ancestors. You can schedule time through the LDS Tools app. We would love to spend time with you Friday evening in the baptistry. Well, this seems somewhat ridiculously fitting for Halloween. I probably would have worded it this way. Forget dressing up as a zombie this Halloween. The Oakland Temple is offering the authentic undead experience, serving your ancestors by dunking them repeatedly in a spooky white costume. We'll see you in the basement baptistry. Or, why bother with cheap thrills? This Friday, trade trick-or-treating for the real thrill of vicarious ritual. Bring the family and help us ensure the souls of your ancestors don't have to spend another night wandering the spirit world without their proper Mormon baptism. Book your dunking through the app. Next, let's go to The Widow's Mite and talk about tithing. They recently published tithing participation rates that detail an interesting trend. The first page of this document says, Tithing participation rate, an LDS member activity metric. We estimate household tithing participation rates in 5 countries based on member donations reported in regulated filings, church membership statistics, national household income, national household sizes. This metric is not the same as membership activity. Some members attend but don't tithe, but trends for each are related. Wage inflation and membership growth have more than offset declining trends in tithing participation. And then it says, see next page. The second page says, donations have grown steadily. Total donations for the same 5 countries are shown here in US dollars, with constant exchange rates to highlight trends in local currency. Donations in local currency have grown. And the third page says member donations in 5 countries. Approximately 4% of LDS membership have not kept up with inflation, indicating net attrition. It is then sort of summed up this way. Change in full tithe payers implied by donations. Canada is down 17%. The UK is down 6%. Netherlands are down 10%. Australia is down 10%. And New Zealand is down 15%. Here are some snippets of how it was discussed on a recent Mormon newscast with Bill Reel, Radio Free Mormon, and Rebecca Biblioteca.
Their latest findings regarding tithing and how tithing is going in the 5 countries that they can look at, or that they choose to look at. So you got Canada is the light blue line. You got the Netherlands, the green line. New Zealand is, that's a little bit of an orangish line. Then United Kingdom, red. Australia is another kind of blue. And then the black line, that's all of them put together.
Yeah, tithing participation rate and LDS member activity metric.
So the idea is simply this. The church is also not really telling us a lot about its membership. Well, it's saying things about it. It doesn't seem like they're necessarily telling us the full story. Let's put it that way. What they're doing is they're looking at the payment of tithing as a metric for membership. If your membership goes down over time, so will the paying of tithing. Over here on the next page, donations have grown steadily. So this is what it looks like amongst these countries. We can see Canada, I believe that's the one that's up here. Yes, the highest. And the others are fighting for second place down here below. Now, I think the Netherlands has last place. Some are flat, maybe going a little bit below. But what they suggest here, and this is important to take into account.
Yeah, this is annual components of donations growth by country.
And it has to do with inflation, because you always got to take inflation into account, especially over the last 8 to 9 years. So what they say is membership donations in those 5 countries that they're studying is around 4% of LDS membership. So that's not a bad cohort to study for purposes of something like this. 4% of the entire membership, and I believe that's what the membership claimed, have not kept up with inflation. So member donations in these 5 countries have not kept up with inflation, indicating that attrition, i.e. membership going down. So if you were just look at it without inflation from this page before, you might think like in Canada, see, you might think that membership's going up. Same with the red one in the United Kingdom, not so much New Zealand, barely maybe in Australia. It looks pretty flat down there in the Netherlands. But when you take into account inflation, you can guess what's going to happen to each of those lines. And they're going to go down, of course. So in Canada, wage inflation up 40% in Canada. Tithings or donations plus 16%. That's what we'd expect it to go up. And when you take all that into account, what really is going on is a negative 17% change in full tithe payers implied by the donations. So even when it's going up, it's going nowhere near up enough to account for the inflation. When you take into account all of these show that full tithe payers are going down in each of these 5 countries that could be measured. In Canada, they're down 17%. In the UK, they're down 6%. In the Netherlands, they're down 10%. In Australia, they're down 10%. And in New Zealand, down 15%. I want to cite to this mainly because I have pretty consistently been poo-pooing the church when it's been talking about how strong the membership is, how it's growing. How in the last 3 years, they had 900,000 new members and all this other kind of stuff. This is another very important part of that, which is the payment of tithing and how the good people at the Widow's Mite are keeping track of this stuff in an effort to keep the church as honest as they know how to be. So the full-time missionaries in the UK, it went from 300 in 2016. And then in 2003, you can see it went up. It's been going down, then it went up. And then this last reporting period for 2024, boom, now it's going down. We see the same kind of thing reflected in the humanitarian aid donations.
I got a couple of thoughts. So first off, the church is talking about significant growth. And at least in these areas, the only 2 explanations for that would be A, as you point out, maybe they're lying. They're just embellishing the numbers. They don't want the world or the members to know that the church is in decline, and they want to hide that. We also have indicators from inside the US that the church is in decline in most parts of the United States. The thing that strikes me is that every country where the numbers are available to us, the church is in decline. That's a strange coincidence, isn't it? That every single place that the church is forced to share its data, the church is in decline in those areas. And yet we're supposed to believe that somehow, as a coincidence also, in all these areas where the church doesn't have to report data, it is having such exceptional growth that it offsets these major countries where they're in decline.
Please go watch their entire newscast. It's fantastic. I agree that it is a crazy, pretty unbelievable coincidence, actually, that in all places the church is required by law to file official reports, that the numbers are going down. And last up to date, let's finish with this quote that I am still thinking about. It says, "Honestly, the best marketing scheme in history is men successfully getting away with calling women the more emotional gender for like eons because they've successfully rebranded anger as not an emotion." To which someone replied, "Men deciding the only logical and just emotion is anger and then calling everyone else too emotional for having a range of them is the greatest trick the devil ever pulled." And that's your update for today, folks. I absolutely hope you have the day that you deserve.